My name is Sophie Chen and I'm 27 years old. 4 days ago, I sat in the executive conference room of my private equity firm, watching my parents walk through the door expecting to meet with a mysterious investor who might save their failing company. My father, dressed in his best suit, his Rolex gleaming, carried a leather portfolio full of financial projections and desperate pitches. My mother, wearing her Chanel suit, clutched her Hermes bag and wore the fake smile she used for important business meetings. My younger brother Marcus followed behind them, looking uncomfortable in a tie. They'd been told the investor wanted to meet the entire family before making a decision on a $500,000 bridge loan their company desperately needed. What they didn't know was that the investor they were meeting was me, the daughter they'd publicly disowned 2 years ago at my 25th birthday party. The failure they'd written off as worthless. The disappointment they'd told 40 relatives would never amount to anything without their money and connections. My father's face when he saw me sitting at the head of that conference table, when he realized I was the investor his company needed. Cult year I'd spent building my success in secret. Before I tell you how the daughter they abandoned became the investor they needed, please like and subscribe if you enjoy these stories. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Now let me tell you how 2 years of silence led to the most satisfying business meeting of my life. I grew up in privilege. My parents, David and Linda Chen, built a successful import-export business over 30 years, Chen Global Trading. At its peak, the company generated about $8 million annually, importing home goods and textiles from Asia and distributing to retail chains across the United States. We lived in a beautiful home in Westchester County, New York, drove luxury cars, belonged to country clubs, took vacations to Europe. I went to private schools where tuition cost $40,000 a year. My brother Marcus, 3 years younger, got the same privileges. From the outside, we were the perfect successful Asian American family. From the inside, we were a family where love was conditional on achievement that matched my parents' very specific definition of success. My parents had a plan for me from birth. I would attend an Ivy League university, preferably Harvard or Yale. I would major in business or economics. I would join Chen Global Trading immediately after graduation, work my way up through the company, eventually take over as CEO when my father retired. My brother Marcus would handle the financial side as CFO now. Together, we'd expand the family business into an empire. Marry successful Chinese American men our parents approved of, have children they could show off to their friends, perpetuate the cycle of achievement and status. That was the script. I followed it perfectly until I was 22. I got into Yale studying economics as expected. I graduated summa cum laude with a 3.9 GPA. I was offered positions at Goldman Sachs, at Morgan Stanley, at prestigious consulting firms. My parents were thrilled, already planning how these opportunities would benefit the family business. Work at Goldman for 3 years, my father said at my graduation dinner, raising his glass of Dom Perignon. Learn high finance. Make connections. Then come to Chen Global, and we'll expand into financial services. Your Yale degree and Wall Street experience will open doors I could never access. But I didn't want to work at Goldman Sachs. I didn't want to join Chen Global Trading. I wanted to start my own company. During my senior year at Yale, I developed a business plan for a sustainable fashion company. Ethical manufacturing, transparent supply chains, direct-to-consumer sales through e-commerce. I'd done extensive research, found potential manufacturing partners in Vietnam who paid fair wages, identified a gap in the market for affordable, sustainable clothing. I had projections showing profitability within 18 months with proper capital investment. I want to start my own company, I told my parents 2 weeks after graduation, showing them my business plan. I've been working on this for a year. I think there's real potential here. The sustainable fashion market is growing at 20% annually. With the right execution, and maybe some seed funding, I could build something meaningful. My father barely looked at the business plan. You want to start a clothing company? He asked, his voice dripping with disdain. After a Yale economics degree? After we spent $250,000 on your education, you want to sell t-shirts, sustainable fashion? I corrected. It's not just about selling clothes. It's about creating an ethical supply chain, changing how the industry operates, building a brand around values that matter to younger consumers. It's a waste, my mother said flatly. You have opportunities at the best financial institutions in the world. You have a chance to join a successful established business. Instead, you want to chase some idealistic startup that will probably fail within a year. 90% of startups fail, Sophie. Did they not teach you that at Yale? They also taught me that the 10% that succeed can become industry changers, I said. Amazon started as a startup. Google started as a startup. Every major company was once someone's idea and a business plan. Those are once-in-a-generation successes, my father said. You're not Jeff Bezos. You're not a visionary tech genius. You're a 22-year-old with no business experience trying to enter an oversaturated market. It's foolish. Childish. A tantrum because you don't want to do what's expected. It's not a tantrum, I said, my voice rising. It's my life. My career. My choice. Choices have consequences, my mother said coldly. If you want to pursue this ridiculous clothing business instead of serious opportunities, you do it without our financial support. See how far your little idea gets without money. I'm not asking for money, I said, though I had hoped they might invest. I just wanted you to understand my decision. We understand, my father said. We understand you're willing to throw away every advantage we've given you to chase a fantasy. Fine, do it. But don't come running back when you fail. I moved out the next week, taking a small apartment in Brooklyn with 2 roommates, a 600 square foot space that cost me $900 a month for my share. I got a job at a consulting firm, $55,000 a year, entry level despite my Yale degree. I worked 60-hour weeks and spent every evening and weekend building my company. I found a co-founder, my Yale roommate Jessica, who had business and design skills. We scraped together $20,000 in savings between us as seed money. We launched our company, Ethic and Thread, 2 months later. Direct-to-consumer sustainable fashion, selling online, marketing through social media, targeting young professional women who cared about environmental and labor practices. Our manufacturing partners in Vietnam paid workers fair wages, provided safe conditions, maintained transparent operations we could verify and advertise. Our clothes were affordable, quality, and had a story behind them that resonated with our target market. The first year was brutal. We barely made revenue. Broke even at best. Lived on ramen and hope. But we grew. Slowly, steadily, building a customer base, refining our supply chain, improving our products. My parents never asked how it was going. They'd written me off. At family dinners I occasionally attended, my father would ask Marcus about his college plans, his internship at an investment bank, his bright future. He'd ask me nothing. I was the failure who'd rejected opportunity. The disappointment who'd chosen dreams over sense. Sophie's working at some startup, my mother would tell relatives who asked about me, her voice dismissive. Playing with clothes, she'll grow out of it eventually. But I didn't grow out of it. By year 2, Ethic and Thread was profitable. Not hugely, but consistently. We were generating $30,000 a month in revenue, 20% margins, enough to pay ourselves small salaries and reinvest in growth. By year 3, we were doing $100,000 monthly, featured in fashion magazines, recognized for ethical practices, building brand awareness. I was 25, running a growing company, working harder than I ever had, and finally feeling like I was building something meaningful. My parents knew none of this. I'd stopped going to most family dinners, claiming work was too busy. When I did attend, I was vague about details. They assumed I was struggling, working some low-level job, living in poverty because I'd rejected their guidance. They didn't know I'd moved to a nicer apartment. Didn't know the business was succeeding. Didn't know I'd been approached by venture capital firms interested in investing. My 25th birthday fell on a Saturday. My mother called 2 weeks before. "We're having a family dinner for your birthday," she said. The whole family. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Dad's booked the private dining room at Shanghai Garden. 7 p.m. Be there. Dress appropriately. I should have known something was wrong. My parents never made a big deal about my birthdays anymore. But I agreed to attend, thinking maybe they wanted to rebuild our relationship. I wore a nice dress, did my makeup carefully, arrived at the restaurant on time. The private dining room was full. 40 relatives, 3 generations, all dressed formally. It looked more like a corporate event than a birthday dinner. "Sophie's here," my mother announced as I walked in. Everyone turned to look. My father stood at the head of the table, microphone in hand. "Since everyone's here," he began, and I realized this wasn't a birthday dinner. This was a performance, with me as the subject. We wanted to gather the family tonight, my father continued, to discuss family values, family legacy, and family responsibility. My daughter Sophie turned 25 today. A milestone age. Quarter century. Time to assess life choices and trajectories. I stood there, frozen, realizing what was happening. 3 years ago, Sophie graduated from Yale with honors. She had opportunities at the best firms in the world. She had the chance to join our family business, to build upon what her mother and I created over 30 years. Instead, she chose to reject all of it. She chose to pursue some small clothing business, some startup that's going nowhere. She chose pride over sense. My mother stood beside him now, nodding. We supported Sophie through the best education money could buy. Yale tuition, living expenses, everything. $250,000 investment in her future. She repaid that investment by throwing away every opportunity and chasing a childish dream. My face was burning. 40 relatives stared at me, some sympathetic, most disapproving. So tonight, my father continued, on Sophie's birthday, we're making an announcement. Sophie is officially cut off from family financial support. No more money. No more assistance. No access to family business resources or connections. She chose independence. She'll have it. Completely. Effective immediately, my mother added. Sophie is no longer listed as a beneficiary in our estate planning. Her brother Marcus will inherit Chen Global Trading entirely. Sophie has made it clear she doesn't value what we've built, so she won't benefit from it. None. Bien now, Ma. The room was silent. I stood there, 40 pairs of eyes on me, my parents standing at the head of the table like judges delivering a verdict. Do you have anything to say? My father asked me. I thought about defending myself. About telling them Ethic and Thread was successful. About explaining that I'd built something they knew nothing about. But looking at their faces, at the satisfied cruelty and how they'd orchestrated this public humiliation, I realized they didn't deserve to know. I hope this makes you feel powerful, I said quietly. Then I walked out. I didn't cry until I got home. Then I cried for hours, not because they'd cut me off financially, I didn't need their money anymore, but because they'd chosen to humiliate me publicly instead of having a private conversation. They'd made my birthday about my failure in front of the entire extended family. They'd disowned me as punishment for not following their script. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives. Some supportive, most awkward condolences. My brother Marcus texted, "I'm sorry. I didn't know they'd do that. That was cruel." But he'd been there. He'd stood silent while they did it. That night, I made a decision. I would build Ethic and Thread into something so successful that my parents would regret every word they'd said. I would prove that my choice wasn't childish or foolish. I would succeed so undeniably that they'd have to acknowledge I was right. If you've ever been publicly humiliated by family for choosing your own path, if you've ever been cut off for not following someone else's script, leave a comment below. Subscribe if you want to hear how the daughter they disowned became the investor they desperately needed. Because what happened over the next 2 years changed everything. After my birthday humiliation, I threw myself into Ethic and Thread with renewed intensity. Jessica and I worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. We expanded our product line, adding sustainable accessories, shoes, home goods. We partnered with environmental organizations, donating percentages of profits to ocean cleanup and reforestation projects. We built a brand identity around not just sustainable fashion but broader environmental consciousness. Our customer base loved it. Sales grew 30% quarter over quarter. By the time I was 26, we were doing $600,000 in monthly revenue, $2 million in annual profit. We had 15 employees, a warehouse in New Jersey, relationships with major retailers interested in carrying our products. Venture capital firms started circling seriously. We took meetings with 5 different VCs, listening to pitches about how they could help us scale. One firm, Meridian Capital, offered particularly attractive terms. $3 million Series A investment for 20% equity, valuing our company at $15 million. It was a good deal. Jessica and I seriously considered it. But then I had a different idea. What if instead of taking VC money, I started my own investment firm? I'd been watching the VC pitch process, learning how they evaluated companies, understanding their models. I'd taken finance classes at Yale. I understood cap tables, equity structures, term sheets. And I had something most early-stage VCs didn't have: actual operational experience building a profitable company from scratch. I talked to Jessica. What if we keep Ethic and Thread independent, maybe take a smaller angel investment to scale slower but maintain control, and I branch into investing in other early-stage companies? You want to become a VC? I want to build a micro VC firm focused on female-founded ethical businesses. There's a gap in the market. Most VCs are men funding male founders building tech companies. I want to fund women building sustainable businesses in fashion, beauty, home goods, industries dominated by female consumers, but underserved by female founders. Where would you get the capital? Jessica asked. I have about $400,000 in savings from my Ethic and Thread stake. I could start there. Invest in 5 to 8 companies at $50,000 to $75,000 each. Help them scale. Take 10 to 20% equity. If even 2 succeed significantly, returns would fund the next round. It was risky. It meant taking money out of Ethic and Thread growth. But Jessica agreed it could work. We brought in an angel investor, a woman named Margaret Luhu, who'd founded and sold a beauty company, who gave us $500,000 for 15% equity. That kept Ethic and Thread funded while I launched Sophie Chen Capital Didiat. I started small, investing in 6 companies that first year: a sustainable beauty brand, an ethical jewelry maker, a women's co-working space, a zero-waste home goods company, a female-focused fitness app, a plant-based meal delivery service. I didn't just give them money. I advised them, used my operational experience, helped them avoid mistakes I'd made. 4 of the 6 companies succeeded significantly. The beauty brand got acquired by Estee Lauder 18 months later. My $50,000 investment became $400,000. The jewelry company went from $50,000 annual revenue to $2 million in 2 years. My equity stake was worth over $300,000. The meal delivery service raised a Series A at $30 million valuation. My $60,000 investment became worth $350,000. Within 2 years, my initial $400,000 investment fund had grown to $1.8 million in returns and unrealized equity value. I raised a larger fund, $2 million from high net worth individuals, and launched Sophie Chen Capital Didiat. Invested in 10 more companies. Higher success rate this time because I'd learned from round 1 mistakes. By the time I was 27, 2 years after my birthday humiliation, Sophie Chen Capital had $4 million in assets under management. I'd invested in 23 companies total. My personal net worth, between my Ethic and Thread equity and my VC fund stakes, was approximately $3.2 million. I owned a condo in Brooklyn I'd paid cash for. Drove a Tesla Model 3, had 0 debt. Lived comfortably but not ostentatiously. My parents knew nothing about any of this. I'd maintained minimal contact, occasional texts on holidays, brief responses when they reached out. They assumed I was still struggling with my little clothing business. They had no idea I'd built 2 successful companies and become a millionaire investor. Then 6 months ago, I heard through family gossip that Chen Global Trading was struggling. Import-export had been devastated by tariff wars, shipping cost increases, and supply chain disruptions from pandemic shutdowns. My parents' company revenue had dropped from $8 million annually to $3 million. They'd laid off staff, cut costs, but were still losing money. My father was 62, my mother, 59. They'd planned to retire in a few years, sell the company or pass it to Marcus. Instead, they were watching their life's work crumble. Marcus reached out to me for the first time in a year. "Sophie, we need to talk. It's about the family business." We met for coffee, awkward but civil. "The company's in trouble," Marcus said. "Dad's too proud to admit how bad it is. But they've burned through savings, max credit lines, and the business is still bleeding money. They need capital, probably $500,000 to restructure debt and pivot the business model." "Why are you telling me?" I asked. "Because you're successful," Marcus said. "I've been following Ethic and Thread. I know you raised funding. I know the company's doing well. I don't know details, but I know you have access to capital and investor networks. Could you help connect them with investors?" "They disowned me," I reminded him. "They publicly cut me off and said I'd never succeed." "Why would I help them?" "Because they're our parents," Marcus said. Because despite everything, they built something meaningful that's now failing. Because maybe proving you succeeded is better revenge than watching them lose everything. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to let them fail, wanted them to face consequences of writing me off. But another part, the part that remembered good childhood moments before I disappointed them, wanted to help. Not for them. For closure. I'll think about it, I told Marcus. But if I help, it's on my terms. 3 months later, Marcus called me frantically. The bank's calling their loans. They have 60 days to pay $800,000 or they lose everything. The business, the house, everything. Dad's been trying to find investors, but no one will touch a failing import-export company. Sophie, please. Is there anything you can do? I'd been preparing for this. I'd reviewed Chen Global Trading financials that Marcus had sent me, illegally, but desperately. The company was salvageable. With proper capital investment, debt restructuring, and business model pivot, it could survive. Maybe even thrive. I could save it. But I wanted them to know who was saving it. Tell Dad to put together a pitch deck, I said. Complete financials, restructuring plan, growth projections. Tell him I know an investor who might be interested. But this investor wants to meet the whole family, understand the dynamics, see commitment from everyone. Can you arrange that? Absolutely, Marcus said. Who's the investor? Someone who specializes in family business restructuring, I said vaguely. Someone who appreciates ethical business practices, and second chances. Set up the meeting. Conference room setting. Formal. Tell them it's their one shot. Marcus arranged everything. He told our parents a mysterious investor wanted to meet them, required family attendance, was their only hope. My father, desperate enough to try anything, agreed. That's how, 2 years after they disowned me at my birthday dinner, my parents walked into a conference room expecting to meet an investor who could save them. Instead, they met their daughter. The moment my father saw me sitting at the head of that conference table, his face went through a progression of emotions I'll never forget. Confusion. Realization. Shock. Horror. Sophie, he said, his voice barely audible. What are you doing here? I'm the investor, I said calmly, gesturing to the chairs across from me. Please, sit down. Let's discuss your business situation. My mother had gone pale. This is a joke. Marcus, what's happening? Sophie is the investor, Marcus said quietly, sitting down. She's the only one willing to help. Sit down and listen. They sat, both looking like they'd been physically struck. I understand Chen Global Trading needs significant capital injection, I said, opening the folder in front of me that contained their financials. $800,000 immediately to satisfy bank loans. Another $500,000 for working capital to restructure operations. 1/3, $3 million total. That's a substantial investment in a failing company. Walk me through why anyone should risk that capital. My father stared at me. You're serious? You have access to that kind of money? I have access to significantly more, I said. But I don't invest emotionally. I invest based on sound business fundamentals and growth potential. So, convince me. What's your turnaround plan? For the next 30 minutes, my father presented their pitch deck. Restructuring plan, new supplier relationships, pivot towards sustainable home goods to capitalize on growing market demand. It was actually solid work. Marcus had clearly helped develop it. Despite everything, I could see the business was salvageable. Your plan is decent, I said when he finished. Execution will be challenging but possible with proper capital and management. However, I have concerns. Primarily, management. Your current leadership has made several strategic errors that led to this crisis. Poor risk management, over-leveraging, failure to adapt to market changes. Why should I believe the same leadership can execute a successful turnaround? We've learned from our mistakes, my mother said, finding her voice. We understand what went wrong. We're committed to doing better. Are you? I asked. Because 2 years ago, you stood in front of 40 relatives and told them I was a failure who'd never succeed without you. You cut me off and disowned me because I chose entrepreneurship over following your script. Yet, here I am, the only investor willing to consider funding you. And here you are, needing me to save. The business you said was so superior to my foolish startup dreams. That suggests your judgment isn't as sound as you believe. My father's face reddened. Sophie, I understand you're angry. What we did was harsh. But This is business. Personal feelings shouldn't enter into investment decisions. You're absolutely right, I agreed. This is business. So let's discuss terms. I'll invest 1.3 million into Chen Global Trading. In exchange, I want 60% equity, controlling interest, full operational authority. You remain as employees, but I make strategic decisions. Marcus, with his finance background, becomes CFO reporting to me. You two transition into advisory roles with no decision-making power. 60%? My mother gasped. That's our company. Where? Built it over 30 years. You want us to give you control? I want controlling interest in exchange for saving you from bankruptcy, I corrected. Your company is worth nothing right now. You're in default. Without my investment, you lose everything. I'm offering to preserve your legacy, keep the company operating, even keep you employed. But I'm not giving you 1 per million to mismanage again. If I'm risking my capital, I'm controlling how it's deployed. My father stood up abruptly. This is revenge. You're punishing us for your birthday dinner. Using our desperate situation to humiliate us. Sit down, I said calmly. This isn't revenge. This is a business offer. Probably the only one you'll get. Every other investor you've approached has declined because your fundamentals are terrible, and your management track record is poor. I'm offering to save you despite that. Because unlike you, I don't let personal feelings override sound business decisions. Take the deal, or don't. But decide quickly. You have 53 days until the bank forecloses. They sat in silence. Marcus finally spoke. Dad, Mom, take the deal. Sophie's offering to save everything. Yes, you lose majority control, but you keep the business, keep your jobs, keep your home. Without this, you lose everything. Listen to your son, I said. He's the smartest person in this family after me. He understood enough to ask for help instead of letting pride destroy everything you built. Dying Earl. My mother was crying now. Sophie, please. We're your parents. We made mistakes. We were too harsh. But you can't just take our company. It's our life's work. My investment firm is my life's work, I said. The company you dismissed as a childish clothing business is worth $8 million now. Ethic and Thread does $20 million in annual revenue. Sophie Chen Capital manages $4 million in assets and has invested in 23 companies. I built this while you assumed I was failing. I built this after you disowned me. And now I'm offering to use what I built to save what you built. But only on terms that protect my investment. Those are the options. Take it, or leave it. Can we have time to think? My father asked. You have 48 hours, I said. After that, I'm moving on to other investment opportunities. This company isn't the only option I have. It's just the only option you have. They left that meeting in shock. I stayed in the conference room alone with Marcus. That was brutal, he said. That was business, I corrected. They taught me that business requires tough decisions and can't be influenced by personal feelings. I learned well. You're really going to take 60% of their company? Marcus asked. If they accept the deal, yes. It's actually a fair valuation given their situation. Most distressed business acquisitions would demand 80 to 90%. I'm being generous. Will you really help them turn it around? Of course, I said. I don't invest in businesses I think will fail. Chen Global is salvageable with proper management and capital. I'll restructure it, modernize operations, pivot into sustainable imports. In 5 years, it could be worth 15 million. Their 40% would be worth 6 million. Better than the zero they currently have. And your 60%? 9 million, I acknowledged. Excellent return on a 1.3 million investment. That's how investment works. Risk capital, grow the business, everyone benefits. If they accept the terms. They called me 36 hours later. My father's voice was hollow. We accept. 60% equity for a 130 million investment and operational control. Draw up the papers. The paperwork took 2 weeks. During that time, I had my attorneys conduct full due diligence on Chen Global Trading. Every financial statement, every contract, every asset and liability. I found additional problems they hadn't disclosed. Unpaid vendor bills, potential litigation from a supplier, underfunded retirement accounts. I used these findings to negotiate better terms. 50,000 more in investment in exchange for additional operational guarantees. They agreed to everything. They had no choice. The deal closed on a Wednesday afternoon in my attorney's conference room. Documents signed, money wired, equity transferred. I now own 60% of my parents' company. They owned 40% of a company they'd spent 30 years building. Effective immediately, I told them at the signing, I'm implementing several operational changes. First, all vendor contracts will be reviewed and renegotiated. Second, we're pivoting product focus towards sustainable home goods, leveraging my ethic and thread supply chain relationships. Third, unnecessary expenses are eliminated. That includes the country club memberships, the luxury car leases, the expensive dinners charged to the company. This is a business, not a personal piggy bank. My mother looked like she might be sick. My father just nodded, defeated. Fourth, I continued, all major decisions go through me. You want to hire someone, fire someone, make a capital purchase, anything over $5,000, I approve it first. You're employees now, not owners. Act accordingly. Sophie, my mother said quietly, do you hate us? Is this all punishment? I looked at her. If I hated you, I'd let you lose everything. If this was punishment, I'd buy your company in bankruptcy auction for pennies on the dollar and fire you both. This isn't hate. This is business. You taught me that personal feelings don't matter in business decisions. I'm applying that lesson. Over the next 6 months, I restructured Chen Global Trading completely. Brought in a professional COO to handle daily operations. Negotiated with creditors to restructure debt at better terms. Cut unnecessary expenses by 40%. Pivoted product lineup towards sustainable imports, leveraging my ethic and thread relationships to secure favorable supplier terms. Modernized marketing, built an e-commerce platform, expanded into retail partnerships I developed through my other portfolio companies. The company stabilized within 3 months. Started growing again by month 6. We're currently projecting $4 million in revenue this year. $6 million next year. The business is working. My parents show up to the office every day. They handle operations, manage relationships, do actual work instead of just collecting profits. They're salaried employees now, $60,000 each annually. Far less than the $300,000 combined they used to take out. But fair for their roles. Mark is a CFO, $90,000 a year, and he's doing excellent work. He's the one person in the family who genuinely has talent for business. Our relationship slowly improved. Not warm, but professional. Respectful. My father eventually, grudgingly, acknowledged that I'd saved the company. You've done well, he said one day, reviewing quarterly results. The restructuring is working. The business is viable again. I didn't think you could do it, because you never thought I could do anything, I said. You wrote me off as a failure because I didn't follow your exact script. But I built 2 successful companies while you drove yours into the ground. Maybe it's time to acknowledge your judgment wasn't as perfect as you believed. He was quiet. Then, you're right. I was wrong about you. About your business. About your capabilities. I let pride and control blind me to your actual achievements. I'm sorry. It wasn't much, but it was more than I expected. My mother apologized separately, more emotional. We hurt you terribly. That birthday dinner, cutting you off publicly, we were cruel. I regret it. I wish I could take it back. You can't, I said, but you can accept that I succeeded despite you, not because of you. And you can accept that sometimes children know their own path better than parents do. She nodded, crying. We're not close. Probably never will be the way some families are. But we're civil. Professional. Lied. They recognize my success now because they had no choice. Their company's survival depended on me. That's not the warm reconciliation you see in movies. But it's honest. Real. Based on respect for competence rather than obligation of blood. I'm 27 now. My net worth is approximately $4.5 million. Ethic and thread is still growing, $22 million in revenue projected this year. Sophie Chen Capital has $6 million under management, and 28 portfolio companies. Chen Global Trading, under my control, is stabilizing and growing. I own 60% of it, worth approximately $3.6 million at current valuation. The daughter they called a failure now controls the family business. The choice they mocked as childish now funds their retirement. The startup they dismissed now overshadows their company. The birthday where they cut me off became the catalyst for me building success they couldn't imagine. I don't regret walking out of that birthday dinner. I don't regret the 2 years of silence. Because those 2 years pushed me to build something they could never deny or dismiss. When they walked into that conference room expecting a mysterious investor and saw me instead, every humiliation they'd inflicted came back to them. Every dismissive comment, every public criticism, every time they'd said I'd fail. All of it reflected in that moment when they realized their survival depended on me. Some people say I was too harsh in my terms. That I took advantage of desperate parents. That 60% equity was excessive. But those people don't understand business. They don't understand that failing companies have no leverage. They don't understand that I risked my capital to save people who'd disown me. They don't understand that business decisions should be based on sound fundamentals, not family obligation. My parents taught me that. I just applied the lesson better than they ever did. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been written off by family for choosing your own path, if you've ever been told you'd fail only to prove them spectacularly wrong, leave a comment. Subscribe if you believe that sometimes the best response to being disowned is succeeding so undeniably, they have no choice but to recognize it. Share this with someone who needs to hear that being cut off isn't failure. It's freedom. Freedom to build something they could never imagine. Freedom to succeed on your terms. Freedom to become the investor they desperately need. Remember, you don't owe family who disowned you anything. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not second chances. If you choose to help them, do it on your terms. Make them respect what you built. Make them acknowledge they were wrong. Make them understand that your success isn't despite your choices. It's because of them. And if they're too proud to accept help from the person they wrote off, let them face the consequences. You're not responsible for saving people who wouldn't save you. You're only responsible for building the life you choose. And sometimes the sweetest victory is sitting at the head of the table while the people who said you'd never succeed have to ask you for help. That's not revenge. That's justice. And justice, when done right, looks exactly like success.